All right, greetings everyone, and welcome to today's NABC NHSBCA webinar, the first of what we hope is a continuing series of programming between our two great organizations. I'm Eric Weberg on the NABC staff. Happy to be with you here today. Before we get started with our discussion with our coaches, I'd like to just say a few brief words about the NABC for anybody on who's not familiar. At the NABC, we're a professional development and advocacy organization that serves coaches from every level of the sport, including high school coaches. And we like to say that our membership runs from the largest Division I arenas down to the smallest high school gyms and anywhere and everywhere in between. So if you're not currently an NABC member, we'd love for you to join our community to take advantage of our numerous member benefits, both coaching related and off the court related benefits as well. Our high school memberships cost just $40 for the upcoming year, and you can become a member today by going to nabc.com/membership, or you can reach out to our membership team anytime, email them at membership@nabc.com. So we hope you'll join us in our work as guardians of the game. And now let me turn it over to one of our board of directors members, Dave Archer at the NHSBCA.
Thank you, Eric. I represent in this process the National High School Basketball Coaches Association. We are an organization of organizations. So all the states that have state basketball coaches associations, we've united them, excuse me, feeling that we could do a better job if all 50 states are pushing for a shot clock or whatever it may be, than if people are doing it on their own. So we have about 10 years old. We have grown dramatically in the number of opportunities that we are giving people. So if your state doesn't have a basketball coaches association, feel free to reach out to me. You just go to our NHSBCA website and you can see who we are, what we do. And let's see. Go ahead, Marshall.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Just looking forward to being on. Am I just doing a quick intro of myself, or?
You can, yeah.
Yeah, I'm currently the head boys basketball coach at Oswego High School. Honored to be here with Coach Martin and you today, and just grateful for the opportunity to share a few words about my journey and see if anything that I have to say would be an encouragement to people tuning in today.
Okay, and Coach Martin.
Dave, great to see you.
Thank you. You too.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure to be here and share some time with so many people that care so much. And you know, Marshall, so much respect for what you do. I miss the days, man. 16 years high school coach, and now I'm wrapped up in the world that you know, we get judged by wins and losses, which is okay. I signed up for it. But as a high school coach, that power to impact young people at a young age, to help guide them, is something that's so powerful. And but it's great to be here. Dave and I both sit on the NABC board, and my hat's off to Dave. The time that he has put, I've been on the board 6 years, I want to say, and in those 6 years, I've seen Dave work so hard to unite high school basketball around the country, rather than have 50 separate entities, to have one united group of folks. And that's what we're here for, man, to help this industry, this business, and the respect for high school coaches around this country.
Perfect. Thank you, Frank. And in just background with me, I coached girls high school, I coached boys high school, and I was a head coach at Division III men's basketball for about 12 years. All the time, throughout my career, I still taught high school. So it was like a combination of, you know, you teach high school and then would run over to the university in the afternoon. So I've got a unique perspective that way, but just like Frank just said, it's a whole different world that we're all living in now. So all right. Anybody else want to have anything else introductory? All right, then. Let's see, you've gone through your coaching journey. Frank, can I go to you? 16 years in high school, that's what you said? Where was it and what did you do?
Yeah, I was Shaky Rodriguez was a legendary high school coach in Miami, Florida. He was my high school coach, and I ended up working for him for 9 seasons. I was his JV coach. Then I got my own head job at a different high school for 2 years at North Miami Senior High. And then when Shaky, who has passed away, when he decided to make the jump to Division I basketball, I came back to Miami Senior High School and spent the rest of my high school career there until the very end, which I ended up going to Booker T. Washington, which was our feeder middle school. It was one of the original Black high schools in Miami that had become a middle school, and then the community wanted it to become a high school again, and for obvious reasons. And they hired me to come in and start their program. And then I got into college year after that. But I miss everything. I think high school coaches on this call appreciate this, Dave, you too. I miss everything about high school basketball, with the exception of my math department head beat me upside the head about my lesson plans. That's the one. That's the one that I kind of can do without. But everything else about high school basketball, I've missed every single day since I left.
Marshall, have you always coached and taught in Oregon?
No, I have kind of a winding journey. I actually started as a middle school math teacher. So the math lesson plan, PTSD, Coach Martin, it's coming back to me as well. When I graduated from the University of Oregon in the year 2000, I joined a program called Teach for America. And it's a 2-year commitment to teach in rural and inner city settings. So, there's Teach for America offices in Miami, Baltimore, East Palo Alto, all over the country. And I was actually assigned to teach middle school math in the South Bronx. So I'm 46 today. Back in 2000, I looked like I was about 17 years old, 22 years old out of college. And I was teaching in Paul Robeson Intermediate School. And my first day of class, I had 33 chairs and 30 desks, or 33 students and 30 desks and chairs. So that was my introduction to teaching math in the inner city New York. Taught there for 3 years and then moved on to a charter school in Harlem. When I initially moved to New York, I was living in Central Harlem, 118th on Lenox, just down the street from Kingdom, and just all the historic, Rice High School and all of that.
Sure.
And I had an inkling that I would love to, coach high school basketball one day, but didn't have the guts to do it, pull the trigger. But one day, my second year teaching middle school charter school in Harlem, the principal of the building came into the room and dropped off a bag of basketballs and said, "You're our boys basketball coach." So I started as a middle school teacher and coach. I taught and I coached there for 2 years. Met my wife, married her, and followed her to Mozambique, Africa, in southern coast of India, off the Indian Ocean. Lived there for 3 years. Helped coach the junior national team. Coached some club teams. Started my own high school program. Just did everything. But my first introduction to Basketball Without Borders was through there. Worked the basketball, the camp in Johannesburg. Got to meet some NBA folks there, and saw people doing basketball for a living, right? And so that's how I kind of got started on the journey. And Coach Martin, you would know this name, Tony Dorado, who's the national manager for high school basketball. Obviously, I'm from Oregon. I grew up here, born and raised in Korea. I'm an immigrant, but I grew up here, graduated from Oregon. Well, every summer I would come back and I had a 1-hour coffee meeting with Coach Dorado. I still call him Coach, even though everybody refers to him as Tony. And I told him I had a year left in this country, in this third world country, great history of basketball there. And I asked him, what can I do to leave the biggest impact in the year that I had, the finite time that I had? And he had a great suggestion that I coach the coaches there so that they would carry on the work that I was doing. And then he made me a deal. He said, if I can find a flight and hotel, to host a coach, then he would send me one of his Nike Elite high school coaches. So I got on the phone back in Mozambique, did the hustle, and found him a 5-star hotel on the Indian Ocean. Found somebody to sponsor a flight, and next thing I know, he had invited Mike Jones from DeMatha Catholic, and he and Mike flew out to Mozambique literally two weeks before I was flying back to America. I hosted a coach's clinic, took him out on a safari out in South Africa, had this amazing time there. And the second night of that week-long stay, Coach Jones said, if you ever end up back in the US, I want you to join my coaching staff. So I went from middle of nowhere in Mozambique, trying to make the big time where I was. And the next thing I know, my wife got a job in Baltimore. I was teaching in inner city Baltimore and commuting, doing the reverse commute to DeMatha Catholic, where I coached as an assistant coach. And I spent 1 year as a JV coach, and that was enough, Coach Martin. 9 years as a JV, you get a statue or something in the JV Hall of Fame. We all know that JV basketball is one of those crossroads, for high school kids. And I got a year of that and made the jump to University of Portland, where I became the director of operations for a couple of years.
That is a unique journey.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Unique as
Wow.
coaches, I read up a little bit on Coach Martin's as well, but I think sometimes you just can't write these things. So
No.
just follow your path, be yourself, and see where it leads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Frank, how did you first get your first coaching college job?
Marshall, by the way, Tony, one of the great human beings in this business that's not celebrated the way he should be because of who he is.
Not enough.
So I'm not surprised that story you just told me. That's who he is.
Yep.
Dave, I'd never really cared for college basketball. I shouldn't say I didn't care. I didn't care to be in it.
Right.
I just wanted to coach in my neighborhood, same neighborhood I grew up in, help the kids in the community the way that community helped me. I didn't come from a college pedigree as a player. I'm the first person in my family to ever step foot on a college campus. So college was not my calling. It was that neighborhood and helping people in that community. But you read about some of these stories that are going on in some of these public schools, inner city schools for the most part. They're going on everywhere, but especially in the inner cities. And I was right in the middle of one of those. And I said, you know what, I think I need to try something different. And so I started applying for jobs all over the country, and I was fortunate. I was the head coach at one of the most prominent public high school basketball teams in the country. My second to last team, we had 11 Division I players on one roster, to give you an idea.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was. I was just lucky. Through my high school coach, I met so many college guys. One of those being Bob Huggins. Was around a lot of McDonald All-Americans, as they were players and the whole deal. But I made the decision, let me try. I got nothing, zero, no calls, no opportunities. I felt like fishing with no bait. I just had like the hook in the water. I was just sitting there and I couldn't even get a nibble. But then the following year, Charlton Young, who's now the associate head coach at Missouri. Charlton was a Miami guy. He was the assistant at Northeastern, and he was recruiting our point guard, a young man by the name of Marcus Barnes. He came up to me. He said, "Frank, I'm taking the job as the assistant at Auburn. My boss loves you. Would you be willing to go to Boston?" I said, "I'm a Miami guy. I wear shorts 365 a year. Boston, are you kidding me?" But I said, you know what? This might be the moment. And so I flew myself up to Boston. I sat down with a gentleman by the name of Rudy Keeling, who was a phenomenal man, who was the head coach at Northeastern University. And coach offered me a job, and I took it. 28 grand, promised me another 5 if I ran his basketball camp, which I said I'd be more than happy to do that. And so I signed up, but he was honest with me. He said, "Frank, we got to win 16. If not, we're getting fired." And guess what? We won 15. You know what happened 3 days after we lost? We got fired.
Really?
And, yeah, true story. So my 5 grand, all I could think of at the time, because I had a 1-year-old son at the time.
Yeah.
And so basically my paycheck went straight for his daycare. And what little I had left, I used it for rent. And then I was like everyone else, like sneaking into the college campus cafeteria with like book bags to steal ham and cheese sandwiches and bring them bring them back to my apartment so I had something to eat at night because I couldn't afford food. But it is what it is. It's
Yeah.
what we do. I don't say that to make anyone like say, oh my God. No, it's just the stuff we take. We make the decisions to take on these opportunities. We got to make it work, not complain about them. And but long story short, Bob Huggins, who I'd gotten to know really, really well over the years, he and I had developed a special friendship. After 4 years at Northeastern, I told him once upon a time, I said, Hugs, I'm never going to ask you for a job. You're my guy. But if you ever need anything, I'm here. Well, when he was going through his DUI suspension, he called me. He says, Frank, you remember when you said if I ever needed anything? I said, yep. He says, I need you to be my assistant coach. I said, when do you need me? This was on a Friday afternoon. I was at the time at a lunch date with my now wife, and we'd been dating for 4 months. And he said, I need you here Monday, which is my first day back on the job. And I said, let me talk to my boss. He goes, I already did. I said, okay, so send me a plane ticket. He said, it's already bought. I said, I'll see you Monday. And away we went, man. And I ended up with a Hall of Famer, which I can't wait to be there for him here in about 3 weeks when he gets inducted into Hall of Fame. 900 career wins. Are you kidding me? But what, you know, and God's always, Dave, I don't mean to sound corny, but think about this. As a young Cuban-American kid running around the inner city of Miami where no one really cared for basketball in the 70s, I end up with a legendary high school coach that opened doors for me, introduced me to a guy like Bob Huggins. And then I end up with Bob Huggins, who's a Hall of Fame guy. Those are my mentors. These are the people that open doors for me, you know, and so I've always been around special people, and I've got zero complaints, man. I've lived a whole life, and I've got dreams for the whole world with what I've experienced because of this ball.
That's a great statement. Great statement. And what a unique path for you. When I was first starting out as a high school teacher, I thought I would be there 3 years teaching social studies in a public school, and then somebody would recognize what a great job I was doing with the JV team and hire me. And that didn't happen. You know, it's kind of like the way the dream doesn't happen. But I did eventually get a head varsity boys coach. And again, I tried that route of how do you get noticed by a college coach? And at that time, you would work at their camps, or you would try to, you know, go to a clinic and stand in the lobby and hope that John Thompson would run over you or something, you know, and you just tried to be, hi, remember me. And it didn't do anything. You know, I applied for 52 jobs that next year. And like Frank, I got zilch, you know, so if for anybody that's part of this process today, that's one way, is to try and to hook on, to have a mentor or whatever, and realize it may not work. And it is a tough road. You know, there's no simple process. So let's see. All right. So what advice, Marshall, would you give any of the people on here that say, I want to coach in college?
Yeah, it's funny. When I saw the title of it, Making the Jump, I dipped my toe in basketball for 2 years at University of Portland. I had the privilege of working for Eric Revenell, who's, done tremendous work, with getting all the kids, college student athletes registered and all that. And now, he's back this way at Oregon State with Coach Tinkle. I was the director of basketball operations there. I had you beat Coach Martin. My starting salary in 2012 was $29,500 plus camp. Ooh. So I don't know, maybe cost of living and, different eras and stuff, maybe it matches out. But we definitely had to get on our camp hustle to get a little bit more on our check. I had and it's funny, a lot of the advice that I end up giving for young coaches, trying to get into college or trying to run their own high school program, like I've had the privilege of doing at Lake Oswego the last 7 years. I heard a podcast, or I read it in a book or a magazine somewhere early on in my career, where Kevin Eastman, says, to never turn down a basketball opportunity. So some of the things that I've done, and again, it's the crazy, I'm sure people tuning in, they've had some sort of crazy, stories like that where you just pick up and go if Coach Huggins calls you, or for me, it was, I had just gotten married. I'm living in Mozambique, and I had an opportunity to take a bus from the capital city of Maputo, a 6-hour bus ride to Johannesburg to work this basketball without borders camp. I had emailed a bunch of people, and in like the zilch thing, you have to get comfortable having people say no to you until one person says yes. And I had this guy, Brooks Meek, who had done an amazing job with the international office back in the day, say, hey, come on down. You're an Oregon guy. I recognize the schools you went to. Go ahead and come down, and we'll make you a volunteer coach. Well, I get on this bus. I get off in downtown Johannesburg, which is sketchy as heck. I lived in Harlem for 6 years, and I'm nervous. And I get on the bus, get into this international school, and the next day they had me in a rebounding and shot blocking station with the Kembe Mutombo and Manute Bolt.
No way.
Yes. And
wow.
And I told the story again many times. You talk about somebody like Tony Dorado, who doesn't, most people outside of our circle wouldn't know, but there was a gentleman, BJ Johnson, who was a longtime scout for the Houston Rockets, who passed away, tragically in a bicycle accident last year. He was my mentor. He brought me in, and I was coaching with him. And next thing I know, I'm standing on the sideline on the other side of, Mike Brown, Quinn Snyder, all these NBA guys. And again, it's the inspiration of that moment that drives you. But it had to be that one. It took courage, or took the choice to say, I'm going to get on that bus and I'm going to do whatever to put myself in a situation where I'm surrounded by people who are also pursuing their dreams, basketball dreams.
Exactly.
So I've done that, obviously, many car rides, many clinics, all of that. But the best advice I got from Coach Jones when I was at DeMatha at the time, obviously, once you're at a program like DeMatha, your foot's in the door. It's the same thing as Coach Martin was talking about, having 11 Division I players. My first year back in 2009 on that staff, Victor Oladipo, Cherry and Grant, they were seniors. Quinn Cook was a junior. Jeremy Grant was a sophomore, barely getting playing time. And they had, 10, 11, Division I players on the roster. Same thing as Coach Martin was explaining. And I'm a Korean American kid from middle of nowhere in Springfield, Oregon, the home of the Simpsons. So you could be in inner city Miami like Coach Martin, or middle of nowhere, in Springfield, Oregon, and we could both end up, making this jump. But the biggest advice that Coach Jones told me, especially as a Korean American, you don't see a lot of us represented in NCAA basketball. But he said to me, at your young age, Marshall, you don't want to get typecast as a recruiter or like an analytics guy or an ops guy. You want to be able to do everything. And Coach Archer, you could probably say that about having been a high school coach and running a D3 program. You have to do everything.
Everything.
And when I got to Coach Rev, at University of Portland, I took pride in that. I didn't, as an ops guy, you didn't get to, develop players, but I knew that when my time would come, I can develop a player. I can go and run that 45-minute workout, and then go order camp t-shirts, and then go, set up travel, and then on and on and on. And even though it was two short years at University of Portland, having refined those skills that I had at DeMatha, learning under Coach Reveno, who runs everything first class and really organized. And I come back to Lake Oswego, and I have ambitions to run this program like I would run a high school, like a DeMatha or a collegiate program. And so, jumping back into high school, knowing how important this work is, like, you guys have mentioned, I feel like I'm able to, with pride, know that my guys are getting a first-class experience from my background.
Can't beat that.
Yeah.
Frank, the way the path used to be, like when you started, or years ahead of that when I started, it doesn't seem to be the same path of coaching a high school situation and then coaching college. Is that path gone? Or is, in other words, do D1 coaches just look for assistants that can just recruit? They're grassroots coaches, or is the path still open for school coaches?
Yeah, Dave, as you know, you and I have sat in many meetings over the last 5-6 years where we're fighting to reopen the door to be able to hire high school coaches or even AAU coaches. Like when we say high school, I'm talking about people that coach at the grassroots level.
Okay.
To come in and work our camps. Everyone has to hire whoever fits them. I'm a teacher at heart.
Mhm.
That's who I am. I don't like hiring used car salesmen. And I don't say that in a negative way. Okay. Some people are okay with that. That's good for them and it works for them. I'm not me. I like hiring people that are going to come in and teach. We recruit players that want to learn, not that just want to become, hey, help me with my hook shot. No, we want people that want to learn. I like being in that environment. And if you got players that want to learn, you better have people that want to teach. And teaching's real. Teaching takes organization. I live by a little motto with the way I plan practice and go about my business every day, which is I better be over prepared and adapt than under prepared and improvise. Because if you start trying to improvise, being underprepared, everyone in your organization knows that you're not sure what you're talking about, and they stop listening to you. And that's in teaching, that's the last thing you can have is when people don't want to listen to you. So it's we've got to figure out a way to allow guys that are people that are coaches to be hired on our staffs, maybe if they're not in college basketball. And David, you and we've sat here for many hours and argued this to the powers to be. So like Marshall takes the ops job in Portland and allow him to have some basketball responsibility. So then when one of my assistants gets another job, I can promote from within because it's somebody that's already been exposed to different things. Allow me to go. I get the job at whatever, Washington, the University of Washington. Let's just use a school.
Yep.
And I want Marshall to come in to work my camp. He's a big time coach. He's going to make my camp better for the campers. Well, right now, if I hire him, I can't recruit anyone that plays for him for 2 years. I think that's ludicrous. I think that's like, it makes no sense with some of the shenanigans that exist in recruiting that I can't go hire a coach to work my basketball camp. Think about what we're saying here, Dave.
That's crazy.
And those are the things that obviously changed, I'd say about 15 years ago.
Yep.
And we've got to figure out a way to get back there. And we've got to figure out a way to get back to I say this all the time. We work at universities. We're not the G League, and I'm not disrespectful to the G League. We work at universities. Education is part of what we signed up to be a part of. How can we not hire educators to come impact the kids that come to our basketball camps? So that's one avenue, just like we all were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I used to get in my car and I drive up I-95 and I make stops at every university between Miami all the way to Georgia Tech and Atlanta. And I'd work basketball camp for all those schools. And that got me in front of people, and they realized if this guy's working camp with that kind of enthusiasm, he must have enthusiasm for real, because all of us that did that. No, you don't make any money. You make enough money to pay your gas to get there.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Dave. I don't have the answers, but I do know that those of us that are in college basketball, education is part of what we do. And we can argue till we're blue in the face, NIL, this, that, education, how much is it worth? I get all that. I'm not against all that. But education is still a big component of what we're all signing up for at the collegiate level. And so we got to figure out a way to reopen that door.
Yes. Because the pattern used to be you have a good high school team, but you're right. You're a classroom teacher too. So you've got those skills and you come along and you do that at the next level. And then now, like you're saying, guys might have to start as a video or an analyst or whatever, and don't have the chance to even run some drills in practice. So
yeah. Can I add something? It's when you do all the high school stuff, you sweep the floors, you do the uniforms, you're the strength coach, you're the basketball coach, you're the psychologist, you're the college organized, recruiting coordinator. Yeah, I did that in high school. It's you do all that stuff. And so now I'm fortunate. I get the opportunity to get a college job. And Marshall said something earlier that kind of triggered something in my head. So I remember I was at K-State and I'm a young head coach, and we were walking into, I can't remember what game it was, but we're getting ready to play a big time game. And a media person says, "Do you feel the pressure that this game brings?" I started laughing. I said, "Pressure?" I said, "Pressure is 35 students, 27 desks, 18 textbooks, 180 days. And you have to educate every single person in that room for 180 days. You don't owe one more than the other." And I said, that's pressure. And, like when you're involved in coaching at the high school level, at the grassroots level, I don't know, today's day and age, if you use a certain word, there's a certain group of people get mad at you. I'm talking about the grassroots level.
Yeah.
You learn to work. You learn how to, and you don't do it for the money. I mean, I preaching to the choir here. My highest coaching salary in high school basketball was $1,760. Now I made another 30 grand because I taught 5 math classes, but I made coaching $1,760. And so when I say that, I'm not saying it again for anyone to feel bad about my journey. I wouldn't trade my journey with anybody.
No.
I just say that because it's the truth. You learn to work. You don't work for the money. You work because you love your job. And so I just thought I'd share that story.
Thank you. Because I think as we talk about in high school coaching right now, the average lifespan of a varsity coach is 3 years. Whether it's, the parents or the administration's not there. So, I look around to, this kid played in college and here he is teaching social studies. No, I don't want to coach. And so as coaches associations, we're having real trouble finding coaches, especially in our program. But if people at your level, Frank, are stressing the right things like you are, then coaches might say, I'd like to be part of that profession. I'd like to start with middle school, whatever it is. But right now they are shying away because of the parents and administration. So you guys can we can have that bond because you're opening the doors or at least shedding the light, So.
It's anytime I have a young person in my life that's a graduate assistant, a young assistant, before they become assistant coaches, a manager, a former player, they always say, because all the young guys in the society we live in today, they all want the salary that comes with being a high major head coaches.
Yep.
But they don't want the work that comes to get there.
No.
And so I tell all of them, I'm like, you want to do this? Go get a high school job, go get a junior college job, go do one or the other, where you have to teach and you got to work and you got no money to recruit if you're at a junior college and you're not making real money in high school or junior college.
No.
So because at the end of the day, 80% of the Division I jobs don't make crazy money. It's
Correct.
very few make the dollar figure that I'm so fortunate to make now. Very few. And so if you're trying to do a job to get paid, there's very few people that have that opportunity. And that's you have to work and make no money to one day, maybe be lucky like I was and have a door open for you. And then it's up to you who you are, to your core, your work ethic, and your beliefs in yourself on whether or not you can have the job. And so
it's a lot of personal, you're talking about a lot of personal development. And then I think what Marshall's talking about, all he went through, you're developing yourself into being this person that could then do this job,
Like Marshall just spoke about getting on a bus in a foreign country and going 6 hours just to work a camp.
Right.
Like we got guys that don't want to walk 6 minutes to get a workout in, and we got guys in youth basketball that if they're not working the Kemba Mutombo out, they're like, I'm not doing it. I did go work the little fat kid out,
Yep.
Go work the football safety that wants to play basketball in the off season when he's 16 years old. Go work those guys out. Learn how to teach those guys. I'd say it all the time. It's easy to teach people that have a great talent for what they do. Like I seem to be a great coach when I taught Michael Beasley. You could have had this book bag right next to me coaching Michael Beasley. He was going to score 26 points a game.
Mhm.
You know, it's go try to help the one that isn't as talented get better, you know? And now when you start coaching the real talented ones, now you better be even better at teaching because their talent, points
Yes.
per game, all that stuff.
Yeah.
That's an indication of their talent. Now, can they improve? That's an indication of coaching.
Mhm.
And that's the challenge that at the end of the day, you got to work, you got to teach, and we're all different. You know,
Yes.
Dave, you learn differently than I do. And
Mhm.
Marshall learns differently than you do. And we all probably teach differently in our strengths. And so at the end of the day, it's about connecting with people and empowering people to grow.
That's powerful. Powerful statement. Marshall, you're running a good program at high school level. Do you have a desire to get into college coaching?
Yeah, I'm going into my 8th year. I spent 2 years in Mozambique running my own high school program. So I guess as a high school coach, I'm a decade in. As a head coach,
Right.
13 years total. So I'm approaching coaches 16 years, you know, maybe 3 years from now. I also had, you know, when I was making that jump to University of Portland, my son was 1 year old, and now he's
Mhm.
11, he's 12, you know, turning 12 this week. And so I think a lot of us, you know, hopefully there's people who are tuning in who are wrestling with the same thing I'm wrestling with. You know, how do I make this work for my family? You know, I think part of the reason I got out of that Division I world, and you know, it was a personal thing for me. My mother got sick with stage 4 breast cancer 2nd year while I was on staff.
Mhm.
And so I walked that journey with her. She's fortunately still alive and fighting it every day. You know, it just really gives you a reminder every day for me of the gift of life and the
Sure.
last 8 years that we've been able to have as a family. So for me personally, I made it a family decision. And so my son's going into 7th grade. So maybe I'll reevaluate as he's going into high
Mhm.
school, right? So all of us try to make that family decision first.
Okay.
So yeah, the siren call is there. I get it all the time. You know, I coach in college, you know, so next time an assistant coaching job opens up locally, you know, they're always, and they use that against me, right? Coach, you might have heard this, you know, towards your end of the year too. Oh, Coach Martin's not going to be there forever. He's going to college. Don't go to that high school, you know, and so I get some of that as well.
Sure.
But, you know, something that you said earlier, that the average of high school varsity coaches last 3 years.
Right.
I mean, that is a crisis. And what the NABC is doing now, trying to reach out to high school coaches like this, I think it's so important. I think it's coaches who were high school coaches who are now in college, like Coach Martin and others, who understand the value and the impact of this work. You know, I thought about the title, Making the Jump. Well, you know, it was a family decision with my mother getting sick, but I
Sure.
made the intentional decision to go back into high school.
Mhm.
When I was attending a local church in Harlem, early on in my teaching career, I made the mistake of saying, you know, this elderly lady came into the pew and she was like, "Hey, what do you do?" You know, and I said, "I'm just a middle school teacher down the street." And that word "just," I mean, she let me have it. Like, how dare you minimize the work that you're doing?
Yes.
And so for many of us, that this title being Making the Jump, you know, it's really encouraging those of you who are tuned in, who are high school coaches today. You are the last of the Cowboys, as Al McGuire used to say, as we would hear all the time when I would work the Snow Valley, Iowa camp. We're the last of the Cowboys.
Yep.
And it used to be 5 years that varsity head coaches lasted, or 7 years. And if you're lucky like me, going into an 8th year. And then now we're hearing that with all the pressures, all the things that we have to do, the lack of financial opportunities, that high school varsity coaches are only lasting 3 years.
On the
That's a
hammer.
crisis.
Yes,
We
it
talk
is.
about coaches had so many viral moments talking about tough love and coaching and all this. We need coaches who by year 3, you're just figuring out how to do this job. And
Yes.
I can admit that my year 3, I look back and I go, man, I didn't know anything. And so
I'm
to
with you.
equip people who are coming into this, to encourage people to say, you know what, you have the best job. Like, to me, I have one of the best jobs coaching along the West Coast. I have college coaches or NBA coaches that I look up to. They would call me mid-season and say, hey, you got an assistant job open for me at Lake Oswego? Because it's what Coach Martin's saying. You reminisce and you romanticize the time when
Mhm.
actually it wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the wins and losses. And it was truly about impacting lives. And so, yeah, I think that's my focus today, is that, and for anybody who's tuned in, I can only see the three of you and the two NABC, screensavers here. But if there's a high school coach here just wrestling with that crossroads, be present, make the big time where you're at. That's a saying that gets tossed around all the time. We all heard it at some point in our lives. I heard it from Nate Palmade, who's now with the organization. When he was an assistant at Oregon State, and this is when, again, early in my high school coaching, you're like, how do I get to where you're at? And he had to say it to me. We've all said it to somebody. We've all heard it from somebody. Make the big time where you're at. And for me, when I heard it, I went back to Mozambique and I try to make that place, like you said, could be the fat kid who's a football player, or it's the kid without shoes in Mozambique who's never played basketball before in his life. And I try to make, the joy of the game, what it's meant for me. I try to pass that on to this kid. I minded my own business. Next thing I know, I'm at the MAPA.
Right.
So I think it's just being present, trying to do the best for the kids that we're in with, and see, and really recognizing that this is truly a privilege to be a high school coach in this day and age.
It is. And I wonder, and Frank, I'll ask you this, with the advent of whether you call them agents or whatever for the top kids, parents think that the personal coach or the summer coach can do no wrong and high school coach can do no right. How do we get along with those characters or guys,
It's two different worlds. High
Okay.
school basketball and summer basketball are two different worlds. Dave, in high school basketball, it requires going to class. It requires walking the hallways with your teammates. It requires standing in a street corner waiting for a bus stop. It requires doing that every single day, 5 days a week. And then here's where they completely bounce off each other. In high school basketball, you end up practicing 100 times to play 20 games. Summer basketball, you practice 8 times to play 20 games. And the reason I share all that is because it's two different worlds. Summer basketball is more like G League basketball.
Yep.
Where you do a lot of individual workouts, and then every once in a while you coexist with people for 3-4 days, and then you all go your separate ways again. And where high school basketball, it's different. You got to coexist with people every single day. It's so you learn more about who's liked and disliked. That's why one of the reasons I think we got so many transfers is because kids have gotten so used to AAU basketball, which there's nothing wrong with AAU basketball. Right. But they've gotten so used to where they just don't get around their teammates for 4 or 5 days at a time. And then they all go to separate areas, don't see each other. They text each other, whatever, but that's different than having to walk hallways together, riding a bus together, practicing against each other every single day. And that's this is the easiest way I can word that one, Dave. You see, when Marshall alluded that he's in year 12, Marshall in year 12, I don't think I knew as much as I knew now, but I had this full head of hair. I made a lot less money. I worked a lot. My days were a lot longer than they are now. I had a full head of hair. Now, after 15 years of head coaching in college basketball, I've got no hair. I look like I've been in a fight with 9 grizzly bears. It's a different animal. But call it high school basketball is structured in a way that's more resembles college basketball more. Like our guys practice 100 practices to play 30 games. And if we can't do and go to class and all the things that come with it, it's so important. And we're seeing kids, I said this years ago. Someone asked me, and people sometimes think I just throw stuff out there to create attention. I throw stuff out there based on what life has shown me. I don't just throw stuff out there. And years ago, somebody said, because I had 5 guys transfer off my team at K-State, 4 or 5 guys. This was years ago. Well, guys don't want to play for you. I said, it has nothing to do with me. If you go to high school, they're transferring left and right on a daily basis. It's just starting to creep into college basketball. Well, here we are now, where this past year we had 1,700 transfers. And it's and that comes, we've created an environment at the grassroots level where that daily attention to being a teammate is not there. And that's a problem. And that's the structure. That's a structural problem. That's not a kid problem. That's a structural problem. And that's why I think I've always been a big advocate, embracing summer coaches and high school coaches to figure out a way to coexist and get along.
Yep.
Because they're both, if they both care, they're both trying to empower the life of a young person. And if it's about uplifting their lives, then we better, it's no different than a husband and a wife that divorce. If you genuinely care about your child, you maintain a level of communication and professionalism between you two, so you impact your child in a positive way. It's the same way. It's
Sure it is.
it's two different worlds, but we got to embrace both of them and figure out a way to get them both to make the game better. Which, if the game gets better, it helps the lives of people.
Yes, it sure does. Because some places it seems like there's a, who's the influencer? Is it the summer coach or is it the high school coach? And then I look at, like in New York's upper New York State where I live, in some of the rural towns, the high school coach is the AAU coach, or they switch positions with his JV coach in the summer. And so there's not the struggle for who's gonna, the summer coach said I should be a shooting guard and you've got me playing down here, that kind of stuff. But you're right, Frank, we got to find a common ground to help that kid just grow, to just be a better person.
Yeah, I used to do it both. I'd run my high school program and I also coached AAU basketball.
Yep.
And by doing that, it allowed me to get to know the Boo Williamses of the world and all those guys that were pioneers of AAU basketball. And I ended up understanding that journey. That's hard. What those guys do is really hard.
Very hard.
It costs a lot of money and they basically do it for free. And it costs a lot of money. But it's we have to understand both. We got to understand, I'm not into this is right, that's wrong. I think we all got our own opinions on those things. But what I do know is that we're all tied in to one thing. It's utilizing that ball to uplift the lives of the young people.
Yep.
And the way it has uplifted mine. And because, my days where I'm going to go back to doing what I used to do before I became a school teacher, which is serve rum and cokes for a living. My days getting there are really close because I'm going out the way I started. I'm going out, disappearing under the same rock I used to live under, serving rum and cokes. I told my wife the other day, when you coach, everyone's mad at you. The parents are pissed at you. Referees are mad at you. The players are mad at you. Your assistants are mad at you. When I was a bartender, everybody loved me. Nobody was ever mad at me. So it's, it is what it is. We got to figure it out. We got to figure out common ground to make it better for the young people.
I like that. Because so much of our game at all levels is at a crisis now, or, a juncture, or whatever you want to call it. So in my teaching career now, I teach juniors and seniors in college that may or may not want to go into education. And they're saying to me, why should I? So why wouldn't you? It's the greatest job on earth.
Absolutely.
And it's going through so much change right now. You can be the leaders. You can decide what is going to happen. You go to industry 10, 15 years ago, you were just a part of a thing. Whereas going to education and coaching now, man, you can be part of the change,
Absolutely.
Yep. All right, we're running down. Elian, is there any in the chat? Any questions there in the chat that, or Eric,
Yeah, hey, Coach Archer, thanks. We do have time to get to a few of the questions here. We'll go just for about 5 minutes. So
Okay.
I'll rapid fire these questions off, and Coach Cho, Coach Martin, feel free to jump in and answer them.
Hey, it's still early over where Marshall's at. It's starting to get close to my bedtime here now. So I'm sleep early these days.
Yeah. All right. Well, the first question comes from Coach Howard. He says, curious about your experiences culture building at the high school and college level and the similarities and differences there. Coach Cho, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, boy, when I first started here, I knew that you talk about being a caretaker of a high school program. Our claim to fame is that Kevin Love played here, and the coach who had coached him had coached here for 19 years, and he had taken over for a long time. Famous coach here, Sonny Long, who coached here for 30 years. So pretty much in the last 6 decades, I'm the third coach in the history of this program. So I was coming into it knowing that I had some big shoes to fill, but at the same time, if I wasn't, I think I'm going to jump the gun here, and Matt Elkin was asking the other question about our identity. How is it for you as an Asian American coach, or Coach Martin as Latino? Like, how do you bring your identity into this? And so my biggest thing was I just needed to be authentic. And obviously we all look up to Coach Wooden and his pyramid of success, and I'm not a list guy. I couldn't keep up with like 20 different bullet points or a pyramid. So I picked 3 points. And I had gone to the Final Four talk with John Gordon, and it was after my first year on staff at University of Portland. And he had a talk at the Final Four, and the topic was one word, and he had a book on it. Basically, when people make New Year's resolutions, you pick one word, and that's your theme of the year, right? So I know there's other coaches who are in the audience. Ed Cooley at Providence, Coach Wright at Villanova. These coaches that all picked one word for their theme of the year, and they followed it. And I thought, that could work for me. So I came back and I picked the word courage. I think I did go through a stage of imposter syndrome. Like, I look around, there aren't people that look like me on the basketball court. Now I could play, and I've always felt like I belonged. That's why it lasted so long. But it was really the first time being in that Division I world, looking around, seeing like, there's nobody that looks like me here. Do I belong here? And I think I went through a little bit of a shaking of my faith. And so every day from that point on, I would come into work. I just would say the word courage, like you're built for this. You have the experience. You belong here. And then my second year, the word that I chose was presence. Obviously, like, we're on the cell phone thing all the time. We're having to solve so many problems, and our attention is always taken away. So presence was a word that I lived really for that year. And so when I got to Lake Oswego, I knew that you can't BS 16, 17, 18-year-olds. They know exactly what you're about. They can smell a phony from a mile away. And so the only thing I could lean on was, hey guys, these are what I bring to the culture: courage, presence, and trust. Whatever I do, I'm going to do everything in my power to earn your trust. And I lived that out authentically. And I think that's what really helped get the culture going. That, this guy wasn't just going to bounce when the parents were trying to get him fired, or this guy wasn't going to bounce when we were 500 the first 2 years. You talk about earning the trust of a community like this. You can imagine I'm this, former college coach at DeMatha, take this job. And I had all sorts of calls coming in, from dads who wanted to transfer their kid into our program. And I just said, for this first, like, whatever I just said, no, like, we're going to build this with our own guys. We may take our lumps, but judge me by year 3. Give me time to build this culture, build this program, and see what happens. And I'm proud to say that we were able to turn the corner on that. The first 2 years were around 500, and there was a lot of calls for, to get me fired or pushed out. And Coach Archer, I made it past year 3, because third year we won our league title, first of 3 consecutive, and we were on our way. And the coolest thing about all this is, by year 4, I realized that I had such a heavy hand in this that, I needed to put the ownership of the program back into their hands. And I said, you guys come up with the word. So we were number 1 in state, had reached that pinnacle, had all the pressure in the world. And you'd be amazed. These teenage boys came up with the word joy. They said, Coach, this is a lot of stress, a lot of pressure. We want to enjoy this journey. We want joy back in practice. And that was a real slap in my
Big one.
face and my staff to say, you know what, no matter what happens, you know, when we look back, we're going to say we had many moments of joy, or we just lost our minds laughing at something goofy, or, you know, had that big win and we're in the locker room for 20 minutes. And so that became a tradition where every year a graduating senior class, they give a word and we build it onto, hopefully we'll get to, you know, Coach Wooden's pyramid by
That's right.
25 years. But if I'm not, then we have the values of joy, resilience, togetherness, and all these words that the players came up with. That's become a part of our building block.
That's a really cool thing. That's a great takeaway for me.
We got time for one more question here. Coach Martin, we'll go to you to this question from Coach Garcia. And he just asks, how do you balance the strenuous coaching job with your family, with your marriage, with things outside of basketball? Well, I know we could spend an entire webinar just talking about that, but curious a few quick thoughts on that.
It's funny. I just had a young guy came by the office and we're sitting around and, you know, and he said to me, "What's the best advice you can give me about coaching?" And I said, "Don't lose your job because of your family, and don't lose your family because of your job." And he said, "How do you figure that out?" I said, "I've got no idea. I'm 38 years in and I still haven't figured that one out." It's hard, man, because your players, everyone talks culture. Let's be honest. We had 1,700 transfers. Culture takes a lifetime to build. You don't build that over 8 months. And our business, the way it's going right now, I'm the culture because I'm the mainstay in the program every single day. And then it takes what Marshall was talking about, figure out what players want to stay with you, when then you can give them the baton to help you build your culture. But that's getting really, really hard in our business because the lack of consistency and continuity. So what does that mean? Why did I go there with the answer? Well, if we keep having 4, 5, 6 players transfer every year, that means that now we have to recruit twice as much because we're constantly replacing players that we used to never spend that time in recruiting. Right. And now we have to, which I think this is real good. It's made us have to recruit our players on a daily basis. We've gotten so wrapped up with winning in games and practices that we lost sight of how important it is to recruit the people in our own lives. It's just like our own children. We got to listen, if we don't recruit they live in our house. We brought them into this world. If we don't recruit them on a daily basis, somebody else is through social media. And so it's brought the attention of having to re-recruit our own players. So as you're doing all that, it becomes really time consuming. So if you're going to get married and have children, I said this because this is where our lives intercept. We ask fans for the 3 most important things that they possess: time, energy, and money. That's what we ask fans to give us when we want them to buy season tickets, then drive to come and see us play, and then root their rear ends off. That's where we're at. That's the 3 most precious things we possess. You know what? You know who the people that take those 3 things away from me the most every day? My children. They take away my time, my money, and my energy. But that's the commitment I made when I decided I wanted to be a father. If not, I shouldn't have been a father. And so, but that's also the commitment I got to give our players. So it's kind of a tug of war for time. But again, it's the job that we signed up for, to be a father, to be a husband, to be a coach. So we have to figure it out. So that means we got to listen to our players when they say, because I'm walking in running, excuse my French, shitty practices because I'm pissed at the world because we're not winning, or because we lost a game, or because I'm exhausted from dealing with my family. I better listen to my players where they say, "Coach, we need joy." And then when I'm running too many practices and spending too much time on the phone at 9 o'clock at night because I'm worried about the next player, when my wife looks at me with a certain look, I'm married to her, so I know what that look is. I can't get defensive and say, well, it's my job. I got to pay the bills. No, I got to put the phone down and pay attention to my family. And that's the balance that's hard. There's no answer to it. But you better pay attention to the people in your life so you can make sure that your attention goes to those that need it. But you know, that's gotten complicated these days because of just the change. Listen, times have changed. Social media has brought a different dynamic into our lives that's made everything we do more complicated with our own children and with our jobs. It's a new dynamic. We're all trying to adapt and adjust. Eventually all this will settle down and then we figure it out. And then there's some other new phenomenon that comes in and disrupts our life.
Yeah.
And then our children are going to be telling their children, hey, I'm not the old geezer like my kids tell me now. I'm too old. It is what it is. It's one of the greatest quotes I've heard in a long, long time was Nick Saban last year. They asked him something about social media and NIL and all this stuff. And he said, the dinosaurs did not adapt. Look what happened to them. I thought that was so powerful. Wow. It's, that's, we got to fight for what we believe in, but we better adapt to times if they start to change, if we want to stay connected to that next generation.
Wow.
Well said, Coach Martin. I think with that, apologize that we've run up over our hour here. So I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Apologies to those questions that we weren't able to get to, but Coach Cho, Coach Martin, Coach Archer, on behalf of the NABC, thank you so much for taking some time out with us today. We hope those of you on the webinar today enjoyed it. Like I said at the start, if you're not currently part of our community at the NABC, we encourage you to check us out, to, as we say, to become a guardian of the game with us and support the work that Dave, Marshall, and Frank do every day. So we can be reached at membership@nabc.com. But with that, again, to the three coaches, thank you. And to everybody on the line, hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.